Hey guys! Today we're diving into another truly horrifying case. If you want to support my channel, make sure to subscribe and stay active. It really helps me out. I'd be super grateful for that. Let's get started. Addiction is often associated with destructive behaviors driven by an attempt to escape reality by altering one's state of mind. There are two main types of addiction: chemical and non-chemical. The first category includes cases where individuals develop an unhealthy dependence on certain substances, such as alcohol, controlled substances, or prescription medications. This type of dependency typically develops gradually, influenced by various factors such as family issues, troubled relationships, psychological disorders, or emotional trauma. The story of a young model, beauty queen, and medical school graduate turned out to be far more complicated than it initially seemed. The title holder of Miss Maryland was found unresponsive at her boyfriend's home, and from the very beginning, it was apparent that an overdose of controlled substances was the cause of her passing. However, this case was far from straightforward. As it turned out, the circumstances surrounding her tragic fate raised numerous questions. Her family had to take matters into their own hands and push for an investigation, as law enforcement showed little urgency, and the person responsible for what happened could have remained free. Sarah Jane Harris was born on December 5, 1996, in Rockville, Montgomery County, Maryland. She was the youngest of four siblings in the loving and close-knit family of Tina Lynn and Mark Harris. She grew up alongside her older sisters, Victoria and Rachel, and her brother Christopher. From an early age, Sarah was independent and highly ambitious. She excelled in school, showing a special interest in biology and anatomy, and as a teenager, she firmly decided to pursue a career in medicine. Her teachers regarded her as a true prodigy and predicted a bright future for her. Languages also came naturally to her. She quickly mastered both French and Spanish and could speak them fluently. Determined to be self-sufficient, Harris got her first job at 14, working as a promotional representative at a large local toy store. She entertained young shoppers by dressing up as Disney princesses and other fairy tale characters. It was there that a modeling scout noticed the striking young girl and invited her to try her hand at modeling. She agreed, and thus her career in the fashion industry began. Sarah possessed a stunning appearance and a flawless figure. She regularly received offers for photo shoots and even signed several advertising contracts. Despite her growing success in modeling, she never abandoned her dream of becoming a doctor. She continued studying diligently, researching colleges and universities to further her education. Friends and acquaintances described Sarah as sociable, cheerful, and full of life. She had a wide range of interests, including painting, music, traveling, and dancing. She was admired by many but remained focused on her studies and work, rarely going on dates. In 2020, at the age of 23, Harris won her state's beauty pageant, earning the title and crown of Miss Maryland. By that time, she was finishing her university studies and had secured an internship at a prestigious private dental clinic. It seemed like she had everything: intelligence, beauty, and a bright future ahead of her. But as the saying goes, something went wrong. Sarah's older sister, Rachel, with whom she had always been particularly close, later shared details with investigators that many in Sarah's circle never suspected. It turned out that at just 14 years old, around the time she got her first job and started earning her own money, she secretly began experimenting with different substances. At first, it was over-the-counter medications from the family's home medicine cabinet. When taken in large doses or mixed with other drugs, they produced sensations she had never experienced before. Around the same time, she fell in with an older crowd, a questionable group of acquaintances who helped her obtain stronger prescription medications. Soon, Sarah began experiencing anxiety disorders and early signs of dependency on substances. She struggled with insomnia, suffered from recurring nightmares, and battled chronic depression. Despite these challenges, she continued to excel in school while working at the same time. The only person aware of her struggles was one of her sisters, who swore to keep it a secret from their mother. Unfortunately, this silence would later come at a steep price, leading to a devastating tragedy. At the age of 18, however, Sarah's family insisted she seek professional help from a psychiatrist. Her loved ones had grown increasingly concerned about her drastic mood swings. One moment, she would be laughing loudly, and the next, she would break down in tears or become irritable and aggressive. It was unsettling, but even then, her mother never suspected that her youngest daughter might be using controlled substances. She attributed Sarah's behavior to stress and exhaustion. After undergoing medical evaluations and consultations with specialists, Sarah was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. The diagnosis was officially confirmed, and she was prescribed medication to help stabilize her condition. She initially followed the doctor's recommendations, but she didn't stop using the stronger substances she had already become accustomed to. As a result, her dependency continued to escalate. In 2018, while still a college student, Sarah attended a rock music festival in a neighboring state with her friends. There, she met a young man named Henry Peterson, and she immediately felt a deep connection with him. The attraction was mutual, and after spending some time together, they exchanged phone numbers, determined to keep in touch. Despite her striking beauty and popularity, Sarah had little experience in romantic relationships, and her connection with Henry became her first serious love. He was nearly 7 years older than her, but the age difference didn't seem to matter to either of them. They shared many common interests, always had something to talk about, and enjoyed each other's company. However, there was one challenge. They lived nearly 10 hours apart. Henry was a musician who played in a rock band and frequently toured across the country. Meanwhile, Sarah couldn't leave her studies and work, so they only saw each other on rare occasions. Whenever possible, Henry would travel to visit her, even if just for a few days. But over time, the infrequent meetings took a toll on their relationship. For a while, they stayed connected through phone calls and social media, making plans for a future together and even considering starting a family. However, after about a year and a half, they mutually decided to part ways. It was Henry who initiated the breakup, as he had grown increasingly concerned about Sarah's unpredictable mood swings and struggles with dependency. Later, Henry admitted that he still had deep feelings for Sarah, but didn't see a future in a long-distance relationship, especially given the challenges she was facing. They remained in touch, and he continued to support her as much as he could. Sarah knew that she could always call her ex-boyfriend to talk or ask for help, and he would never turn her away. In 2020, Sarah visited a private dental clinic to have her wisdom teeth removed, as they were causing her significant discomfort. The procedure was quite complex, requiring multiple visits to ensure everything was done properly. She was fortunate enough to be treated by the clinic's owner, Dr. James Ryan, an appointment that was considered a rare opportunity, as his schedule was typically booked months in advance. During her treatment, Sarah mentioned to the doctor that she was a medical student actively looking for an internship. Without hesitation, Ryan offered her a part-time assistant position at his clinic. After some consideration, she accepted. Working at a well-regarded dental practice, one of the most prestigious in the city, seemed like the perfect starting point for her career. From the very beginning, Dr. Ryan appeared attentive and caring. Even when Sarah was still just his patient, he personally called to check on her recovery, ask how she was feeling, and remind her about upcoming appointments. She appreciated the attention, trusted James, and respected him as a professional. Shortly after Sarah started working at the clinic, Dr. Ryan began showing clear signs of personal interest in her. He gave her compliments and frequently invited her out. At first, the young assistant had no intention of reciprocating his advances. After all, he was nearly twice her age. However, within a few months, their professional relationship evolved into something more personal. By early 2021, they had decided to move in together, settling into James's luxurious home. At the time, Dr. Ryan was 47 years old, divorced, and had 3 adult children from his previous marriage, as well as a young son from a short-lived relationship with a former employee of his clinic. He was a well-established and financially secure man who provided for his former partner and their son, while also supporting his older children by covering their tuition at prestigious institutions. Known as a charming and generous person, Ryan had a reputation for being quite the ladies' man, someone who knew how to court women with lavish gifts and grand gestures. Ryan's clinic was one of the most well-known and sought-after dental practices in Montgomery County. It was renowned not only for providing top-tier dental care, but also for utilizing cutting-edge technology in both treatment and cosmetic procedures. The clinic's services came at a steep price, but that didn't deter patients. Its impeccable reputation kept the demand consistently high. When Sarah started dating Dr. James Ryan, her friends envied her. It seemed like the perfect match. He showered her with expensive gifts, paid for luxury resort vacations not only for her, but also for her family, and even bought her a high-end car. On top of that, after their relationship began, Sarah started spending less and less time at the clinic, yet she continued receiving her paycheck. She enjoyed life, traveling, shopping, and indulging in leisure, until a terrible tragedy cut her life short. And with that tragedy came shocking revelations that no one had seen coming. On January 26, 2022, around 6 in the morning, an anxious man called emergency services, reporting that his girlfriend was unresponsive and had likely suffered an overdose. The caller identified himself as Dr. James Ryan, stating that he had attempted to resuscitate her, performing CPR, but his efforts were in vain. He pleaded for paramedics to arrive as soon as possible while continuing his attempts to revive her. First responders reached the scene within minutes, but unfortunately there was nothing they could do. Sarah had passed away several hours earlier. Her body was found on the living room floor. There were no visible signs of injury or trauma, but she appeared extremely thin and frail. James was nearby, visibly distressed and in tears. He once again insisted that his partner had suffered an overdose, though it was unclear how exactly it had happened. Investigators immediately considered 3 possible explanations: intentional self-harm, an accidental overdose, or foul play. However, the last option was quickly dismissed due to the absence of injuries or signs of a struggle. Everything seemed to indicate that Sarah had taken a lethal dose of potent substances on her own. According to James, the night before the tragedy, he and Sarah had stayed up late watching TV together. Around midnight, she mentioned that she had work in the morning and needed to get some sleep. He then went upstairs to the bedroom, but Sarah said she wanted to finish the movie and would join him later. At around 5:30 a.m., James woke up and noticed that Sarah was still not in bed. Concerned, he went downstairs to check on her and found her lying on the floor next to the couch. She wasn't breathing, and a thick white foam was coming from her mouth. As a trained medical professional, James quickly sprang into action. He rolled Sarah onto her side, cleared her airway, and began CPR. For nearly 15 minutes, he performed mouth-to-mouth resuscitation and chest compressions, but nothing worked. Realizing that his efforts were futile, he called emergency services to report what had happened. According to Ryan, his partner may have taken a large dose of a powerful anesthetic, mixing it with other medications, which ultimately led to heart failure. He admitted that Sarah had been secretly taking medications from the clinic for personal use for quite some time, and while he was aware of it, he never reported her to avoid legal trouble for her. James claimed that he did everything he could to help his partner overcome her dependency. At home, he administered IV drips to detoxify her system, reduce intoxication, and prevent dehydration. At the same time, he was searching for specialists who could guide her through rehabilitation, all while trying to keep the matter private. Ryan said he discovered Sarah's dependency shortly after she moved in with him. One evening, he accidentally walked in on her administering an intravenous injection to herself. She explained that she had struggled with bipolar disorder, anxiety, and depression since her teenage years, and taking medications was the only thing that helped her stay balanced and avoid a complete breakdown. Ryan's statement seemed convincing, and toxicology reports supported his claims. Sarah had passed away due to a lethal combination of multiple potent substances. The autopsy showed no signs of external injuries or trauma. Her veins, however, were heavily scarred, indicating long-term intravenous use. In addition, she appeared severely underweight and frail, weighing only 83 pounds at the time of her passing. That same morning, Sarah's mother was informed of the tragedy and given the details of James Ryan's account. However, from the very beginning, she made it clear that she did not believe a single word of his story. Tina was hostile toward him, immediately blaming her daughter's partner for what had happened. She insisted that from the start of their relationship, she had felt something was off about him, something threatening. Overcome with grief, she presented her own version of events, which differed significantly from what James had told investigators. According to Tina, Sarah had never truly loved him. Instead, he had relentlessly pursued her, using various tactics to win her over and ultimately make her dependent on him. Tina recounted that 2 years earlier, Sarah had sought treatment at Ryan's clinic based on a friend's recommendation, as she needed surgical removal of her wisdom teeth. From the very first appointment, the doctor showed interest in her, not just as a patient, but as a woman. He began calling her daily, sending messages, and making it clear that he was attracted to her. When James learned that Sarah was looking for an internship, he immediately offered her a position at his clinic, with a generous salary and the opportunity to work directly under his supervision. She eagerly accepted, and within a couple of weeks, she started her duties as an assistant. Tina sensed something was off from the very beginning and strongly opposed her daughter's involvement with an older man. She tried to have a serious conversation with Sarah, but she brushed off her concerns, assuring her mother that their relationship was purely professional. However, their interactions soon evolved into a close friendship, though Sarah continued to insist that there was nothing romantic between them. As New Year's Eve 2021 approached, Ryan invited Sarah to an upscale restaurant, where he surprised her with an extravagant diamond ring worth a small fortune. That night, he confessed his love, asked her to be his partner, and suggested they move in together. Up until that moment, he had given her lavish gifts before, but this was the first time he openly expressed his feelings. Without much hesitation, Sarah agreed, and just a month after they moved in together, he gifted her a luxurious Mitsubishi Prudia. In Tina's opinion, James was essentially buying her daughter's affection, showering her with expensive gifts, and fulfilling her every wish. But deep down, Sarah didn't have real feelings for him. He wasn't just covering her personal expenses. He had also taken Tina and her daughters on multiple vacations at his expense. His generosity lulled the family into believing his love was genuine, making them lower their guard. It wasn't long before Dr. Ryan discovered another weakness of Sarah's, her dependency on controlled substances. He began noticing that certain medications were disappearing from the clinic. When he eventually caught Sarah taking them, he didn't report her to the authorities. Instead, he let it slide. Sarah, in turn, allegedly threatened to leave him if he cut off her supply. And rather than risk losing her, James chose to look the other way. Her mother was convinced that James was the one who had introduced her daughter to injectable substances with narcotic effects. Additionally, she recalled an unsettling conversation from a trip they had taken to Hawaii. One evening, after drinking too much, James confessed that he had first seen Sarah years earlier at the toy store, dressed as a princess, when he visited with his children. At the time, she was only 15 years old, and even then, he was captivated by her beauty. According to Tina, Ryan had been obsessed with her daughter ever since and did everything he could to keep her close. Authorities did not conduct a formal search of James Ryan's home. Instead, they performed only a brief walkthrough. The findings appeared to support Ryan's version of events. Prescription medications were discovered in Sarah's purse, bedside drawer, and even in her car. Throughout the house, investigators also found discarded syringe wrappers, tourniquets, and IV solution bottles, further reinforcing the assumption that Sarah had been using substances for an extended period. Several empty vials and ampoules were found next to Sarah's body, and traces of these substances were later detected in her system. It appeared that she had administered them to herself shortly before her passing. This combination of medications was ultimately the cause of her untimely death. Investigators also found messages on Sarah's phone from her former boyfriend, Henry, with whom she had remained friends. In her final texts, she confided in him about her ongoing depression and hinted that she was on the verge of making a decision to end her suffering. Detectives interpreted this as a clear sign that Sarah had been contemplating taking her own life, and they concluded that she had followed through with it. No criminal charges were filed. Ryan's home was not designated as a crime scene, and he was released without any legal consequences, as authorities found no evidence of wrongdoing on his part. Because of this, Sarah's personal belongings, including her phone and laptop, were not seized for further examination. Sarah's family strongly disagreed with the investigation's conclusions and continued to hold Dr. James Ryan responsible for her tragic fate. They believed that law enforcement had let a guilty man walk free and feared that he would never be held accountable. Determined to seek justice, Sarah's mother and sisters decided to launch their own independent investigation to expose the truth. Tina returned to the police station to provide additional testimony. She revealed that after her daughter moved in with Ryan, she underwent a drastic transformation, both physically and behaviorally. According to her mother, by the summer of 2021, Sarah had lost a significant amount of weight. As a model, she had always been slim, but now she appeared visibly frail and unwell. That October, James took Sarah and her mother on vacation to Florida. During the trip, Tina noticed that despite the warm weather, her daughter insisted on wearing long-sleeved clothing, which struck her as odd. A few days after they returned home, Sarah called her mother, speaking incoherently as if she were in a dazed state. Alarmed, Tina rushed to Ryan's house and found Sarah barely coherent. It was then that she noticed marks on her arms for the first time. Tina took photographs of the empty vials and ampoules scattered around the house, convinced that James had played a role in her daughter's substance use. She wanted to report him to the police, but Sarah begged her not to. She assured her mother that everything was under control and that James was actually trying to help her. To ease her mother's concerns, Sarah even agreed to move back home. However, just a few days later, she returned to Ryan's house. On December 13th, the situation repeated itself. Sarah once again called her mother in a disoriented state, speaking incoherently. Tina rushed over again, only to find an even more disturbing scene. Sarah's weight had dropped to a dangerously low level, her arms were covered in injection marks, and next to the couch where she lay stood an IV stand. Scattered across the floor were vials and ampoules containing unknown substances. Once again, she was prevented from calling emergency services or notifying the authorities. She was told that Sarah had just received an IV treatment to combat dehydration. Tina wanted to take her daughter home by force, but Sarah threatened to cut off all contact with her family if she did. That was the last time her mother saw her alive. After Sarah's tragic passing, her mother and sister took her phone and laptop, hoping to find evidence that would prove Dr. Ryan's involvement. As they combed through the messages, they discovered numerous exchanges between Sarah and James, frequently mentioning specific medications, including powerful anesthetics and tranquilizers. For the last 6 months of her life, Sarah had barely been showing up at the clinic. She was reportedly under the influence most of the time, and James didn't want others to see her in that condition. Meanwhile, he continued to finance all her expenses and indulged her every request, including bringing home the substances she asked for, just to keep her from leaving him. Sarah's sister printed out all of her messages with James, in which they repeatedly discussed controlled substances. She attached these messages to the photographs her mother had taken inside Ryan's home during her visits, and took them to the police, demanding that a criminal case be opened against him for intentional harm leading to death. Although the evidence was circumstantial, it prompted law enforcement to take another look at the circumstances surrounding Sarah's passing. It became clear that the dentist had indeed been supplying prescription medications to his partner at her request, and had also ignored the fact that she had been taking them from the clinic without permission. On March 22nd, Dr. James Ryan was arrested and charged in connection with the death of his young partner. While he admitted knowing about Sarah's substance dependency, he insisted that he had the situation under control. James claimed that he had been trying to help her break free from her dangerous habits, administering IV treatments to prevent dehydration and attempting to regulate her dosage. However, on that fateful night, he failed to intervene in time. On August 25, 2023, James Ryan was found guilty of second-degree homicide, as the court determined that he could not have been unaware of the life-threatening consequences of his actions. Additionally, he was convicted of unlawful possession of controlled substances. He was sentenced to 45 years in prison with the possibility of parole no earlier than 30 years into his sentence. Thanks for watching, everyone. Your support means a lot to me, and you can help my channel grow by hitting that like button, dropping a comment, and sharing this video. Your engagement really makes a difference. See you soon.